One of the most common and popularly used adages in politics is that you can always tell who the most popular opponent is because that's the one who's getting the most attention. If that's the case, Georgia Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones has gotten a lot of attention from one of his primary opponents. And the irony is that the lieutenant governor hasn't even announced whether or not he's running for higher office. This is Political Update for Friday, June 20th. I'm Tim Darnell, joined by my friend and colleague Rick Fulbaum. Rick, we're talking about the 2026 governor's race.
Yeah.
Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr is the first Republican and the first overall candidate who announced his candidacy for governor next year. He is so far the only Republican candidate who has announced for the governorship. But within the last 24 to 36 hours, a group of supporters has released an ad where the Attorney General is attacking Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. Now, Burt Jones is widely assumed to be running for governor in 2026. In fact, there are several other contenders who are already lining up for the lieutenant governorship's job. Lieutenant Governor Jones has not formally announced whether or not he's running for governor or running for re-election in 2026. But this attack ad from Chris Carr is kind of a preemptive strike across the bow, across someone who is widely going to be considered, I should say, to be the front runner to become Georgia's next governor.
Well, another political adage, as well as in the boxing world, is hit him early and often. And that's really what's going on here. You know, why wait until someone declares his candidacy when you have a group of people who have the money and the resources to pay for television commercials that go after him? So that's exactly what's happening here with a group of Republicans who are aligned with Chris Carr. They are supporting his candidacy for the governorship as the successor to Brian Kemp, very popular two-term Republican governor who cannot run again because of term limits. And you're right, Burt Jones is not in the race yet, but it is all but a foregone conclusion that he will at some point enter the race. And so these ads that are attacking him, paid for by supporters of Chris Carr, have begun to run, and we'll see if it makes any headway. It's still very early in this race.
It is very early. I was watching the ad when you brought it to my attention this morning, Friday, June 20th, 2025, in this edition of Political Update. The ad actually starts off with the admission Georgia's governor's race is a year away. You and I have talked about this extensively in the past. Who is actually paying attention right now to the 26 governor's race besides people like you and I?
I was going to say we are, and there are other political news junkies out there who follow this stuff, of course, but the vast majority of Georgians are not yet paying attention to this. Republicans are not yet paying attention to the field of Republican candidates who may eventually be among those for them to choose from. Same with Democrats, even though we have more Democratic candidates who have come out and announced their candidacy. I still think the Democratic primary voters are not yet tuned in. But you do see sort of little moments of some candidates trying to break through, trying to establish sort of a foothold in so that, when people do start to pay attention, they've sort of set the foundation for what their campaigns are going to be about. You see some of the candidates staking out early positions on different issues that are, of course, very relevant today. They might not be so relevant when the election takes place, but, for example, talking about the possibility of the U.S. becoming involved militarily in Iran, that is something that is very, very current and front and center. And so you see some of the candidates, some of the declared candidates, or some of the candidates who may declare coming out and giving their positions on this issue. But as far as who's paying attention, I think it's probably a very small number of people at this point.
We know that a lot of people are paying attention to what you just mentioned a few moments ago. That is possible U.S. military involvement in the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Iran. Marjorie Taylor Greene, very controversial in Northwest Georgia congresswoman, it's kind of tying into what we're talking about because she has publicly stated that she is considering a possible gubernatorial run in 2026. She has been very vocal on Capitol Hill in her opposition to any U.S. military involvement in that conflict. We have not heard really very many other position statements on issues of any kind from the lieutenant governor's office. We saw a statement from Attorney General Chris Carr earlier this week regarding the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to affirm Tennessee's ban of public funds in the use of gender-affirming surgeries for minors. Nothing from the Lieutenant Governor's office. You and I received a barrage of press releases and statements from various political candidates who are commenting on the issues of the day. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones' office has been pretty quiet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's just because he hasn't really officially announced his candidacy yet. They're probably, his communications team is in the process, I'm sure, behind the scenes of sort of preparing for that launch. And it really doesn't do them any good at this point to have the lieutenant governor of the state of Georgia come out and weigh in on some of these, certainly the potential for U.S. involvement in a war in Iran. I mean, it does make sense for someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a sitting member of Congress, and the U.S. Constitution gives Congress the authority to declare war. So her views on that conflict and the potential for U.S. involvement are relevant. But for someone like Burt Jones or even Chris Carr, for that matter, to be weighing in on that, I think would be a little out of place for them. But on the issue of the Supreme Court decision that you mentioned on gender affirming care, while we haven't heard from Burt Jones, we have heard from Chris Carr, the declared candidate and the current Attorney General of Georgia, who came out very quickly. My inbox, I heard from his communications team within minutes of the Supreme Court announcement saying that the Attorney General Carr, he agrees with the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court. So they're wanting to get out, and show, his views on that very important issue, an issue that, of course, is important to the transgender community, but also very important to Republican primary voters. And these are the most dedicated. Any voter that participates in a primary, which usually has a much lower turnout than a general election, these are the most committed of voters. These are the ones that are paying the closest attention. And so it's important, I think, for him to get out there and let these people know where he stands on this particular issue. I'm talking about Carr. And I think we'll probably hear the same thing from the Jones camp once the lieutenant governor goes ahead and makes it official.
Well, as it stands right now, Georgia's 26th governor's race is wide open. We know that Governor Brian Kemp is term limited, meaning that in 2026, Georgia will arguably have one of the most watched gubernatorial elections in the 2026 midterms. Right now, we have 4 declared candidates, 1 on the Republican side, Attorney General Chris Carr, 3 on the Democratic side, local businessman and pastor Olu Brown, former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, and State Senator Jason Esteves from Atlanta. Jason Esteves' campaign has been very aggressive in rounding up a lot of endorsements. Several weeks ago, when you and I talked in an earlier edition of Political Update from Atlanta News First, that he secured the endorsements of 18 Atlanta City Council members, state lawmakers, and a couple of members of the Atlanta Public School Board and a DeKalb County Commissioner. This past week, he picked up the endorsement of an organization called the Georgia Federation of Public Service Employees. from our conversations, I tend to think you're a little bit skeptical as far as how these endorsements actually impact an overall campaign. But you have to admit, he's being very aggressive in securing a lot of endorsements that he hopes will pay off in a primary victory in a year from now.
Well, sure. I mean, I think it's all about creating a narrative that every political candidate who enters a race wants to write his or her own story. And the story that Jason Esteves wants to write right now is that he is getting the most endorsements. He is popular with these various, stakeholders within the Democratic Party. When it comes to members of different unions and different organizations like that, he's able to tell the story that he's getting their support. Whether or not that sort of is seeping through and getting through to people that's another question altogether. But any opportunity that a candidate has to put him or herself out there, to send out a news release to members of the media touting the latest endorsement, or in the case of Keisha Lance Bottoms, saying that she's a grand marshal at the Juneteenth parade, which she was this past week. And the video of her, the video, it's not really video these days, but the images of her, in the parade, sitting on top of the car and waving to the crowds, those are the images that then get played on the news, and that begin to sort of seep into the consciousness of people who are watching and who are starting to pay attention. And so all of these are they're sort of small things right now, but I think that the candidates are looking at the cumulative effect of all of these endorsements that Esteves is getting. He hopes that tells a story that he wants to tell.
Are you surprised that, from our standpoint at least, that the Bottoms campaign hasn't been a little bit more aggressive in securing endorsements? We get, as I just mentioned, you and I and the entire newsroom here at Atlanta News First receive a lot of information, a lot of position statements, a lot of campaign announcements. We've seen the former mayor of Atlanta issue statements in opposition to various measures from the Trump White House, but not really very aggressive in publicizing campaign appearances. Do you get the feeling that her campaign is off to a little bit of a slow or sluggish start?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, you asked that question, because I tend to agree with you. I think that it's it has been a little bit of a sputtering start for her campaign. I mean, she came out and before her official announcement, she was teasing, I'm going to have an announcement, to try to, to generate interest and get people sort of buzzing about what she was going to announce. And of course, it also came out, her official announcement came out at the same time that a book that she has written has come out. So, I think that her campaign is probably, still trying to, get their footing in terms of the story that they want to tell for the former mayor, and maybe endorsements at this point is that they've decided that that's not the most important thing for them right now. They're sort of ceding that to Esteves and any of the other candidates who want to go get endorsements. But at the same time, if they're not going to take that track, they need to take another track and figure out what they do want to put out there. And you're right, they've been quiet compared to a lot of the other campaigns, which are always clamoring for media attention.
Well, some of the other elections that we're following as we wrap up this edition, political update on Atlanta News First. Earlier this week, a special primary election was held for the Georgia Public Service Commission. You can find all of the results of that race on Atlanta News First and atlantanewsfirst.com. This has been Political Update for Friday, June 20th. For Rick Folbaum, I'm Tim Darnell. Thanks for watching and listening, and be sure to follow Atlanta News First and atlantanewsfirst.com for all of Georgia and Atlanta's and the nation's late-breaking political news and information. Thank you for watching Political Update from Atlanta News First Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and political updates, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Listen to more of our political update podcasts by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.